Have you ever sat behind the wheel, alone? Parked in the driveway of your house, watching the clouds grow darker and rumble right before a heavy rainfall? Shh! Can you hear that? All sounds fall silent except for the pitter-patter of water hitting against the windows and pavement. You have nowhere to go, and no one to meet. Yet you're in the car with your mind traveling to different years of your life. It's pulling out memories you could have sworn you'd forgotten, trying to make sense of why things ended up the way they are now. In case you had trouble figuring it out, I was describing a moment involving myself, which I will come back to a little later on. But first, I have to share with you all the events leading up to that particular scene, which means we'll have to take a trip back in time. Just a quick heads up. There are a few no big deal rules. Number 1, the characters are real, but fictional names will be given to protect their identities. Number 2, the stories are real, but the locations switched up. Again, to protect their identities. You know what's funny? The word protection. For instance, take the scenario I described earlier with sitting in the car observing a rainstorm. The sheets of metal that made up the car was protecting me, keeping me dry. The heat from the vents, keeping me warm. I felt safe. Take all that away and my clothes will get soaked. With each drop of rain, my makeup will wash away. And I'll feel really cold. Similarly, isn't that what some of you did to me? Invaded my safe zone through friendship, and at the right opportunity, stripped me of my protective barrier and left me out in the pouring rain, exposing all of my vulnerabilities and insecurities. Can we cue the laughter and gossip as I stand alone with the words humiliated stamped across my forehead? And yet here I am, narrating my personal life, all while trying to hide, or shall I say protect, what most storytellers do right off the bat: give a face to the name. This leads me to number 3. Ever so often, I will say something that will be hard to stomach, but please refrain from the condolences. I'm not trying to be Hannah Baker from 13 Reasons Why, and I'm not about to take my own life. What I am about to do is share my variation, my truth. You may be asking, why? Well, that's number 4. I'm hoping that through hearing these stories, some of you can relate, perhaps even come to realize the bigger picture, that there is always an alternative to everything. Most importantly, I want you to know I'm with you. I understand you, and even though I don't know you, I love you. Now, for those of you whose spidey senses start to tingle and conclude that a character closely resembles you, chances are you're right. Congratulations, you're famous! And for that, I have a few questions for you. How does it feel to be reminded of your actions towards me? Is it something you're totally over? Or do you still regret it? Let me tell you that feelings of guilt, pain, sadness are all emotions that come from within. They simply can't be cleansed with water. Oh, the irony. So before we begin, let me introduce myself. The name's Susanna Dutt. Most people call me Miss Bollywood. I'll let you know how that happened in a bit. Now, why don't you grab your favorite beverage, get comfortable, because this will take a while. 6th grade. Everything was cool up until then. I mean, kids at our age only cared about spending time on the playground during recess and lunch, and when it rained, to stay in the classroom and engage in a quiet activity like reading a book together or doing some doodling. That all changed when our teacher decided it would be a good idea to mix the 6th and 7th graders together for an assignment. It was for gym class. We were supposed to create a group of 4, 2 6th graders and 2 7th. Then, practice and perform a 3-minute piece using music and gymnastics equipment. That lunch hour, we were walking towards the grass field to play some soccer when we spotted Maddie Sanchez and Alyssa Hewitt, making what seemed like their 3rd walk around the school. You thought we should ask them to be our partners for the gymnastics assignment, and before getting my input, you'd already got their attention by waving your arms as if you're trying to control traffic. You introduced yourself as Nicole Gray, and by the time I had caught up to you, I heard Alyssa say, "Sure, let's plan a rehearsal day." The following week, I had caught a terrible stomach virus and had to stay home, which also meant that I had to miss our very first meeting at Maddie's house. I remember calling you that night to ask about homework and how the meeting went. From the tone of your voice, something didn't feel right. You told me to read chapters 12 to 15 from the book Where the Red Fern Grows and write a 1-page story with an illustration on what I planned to do during spring break. As for the meeting, you said it went great. You all had brainstormed a routine and would practice it on Friday, right after school. When I asked where, the annoyance in your voice had grown 5 times more than when we had first started the conversation. Maddie's house, where else, is what you said. Before I could respond back, you cut me off and said you had to go and eat dinner. At school the next day, I felt thirsty, so I was on my way to drink from the water fountain when I heard some familiar voices. Before turning the corner, I slowly stood behind the wall and peeked over. That's when I saw Alyssa, Maddie, and you, Nicole. You guys were trying so hard to whisper, but I heard everything. Alyssa thought I was a freak. Maddie just wanted the project to be over with. And Nicole, when they asked if you'd rather hang out with me or with them from now on, you chose them. Wow. It's good to know you're the type to throw away an old friendship for new ones. Whatever happened to keeping both? Maybe it was peer pressure. Yeah, why don't you put the blame on that? Anyway, I guess the decision was made. You no longer wanted to be my friend, yet you couldn't tell me to my face, so you avoided me. I tried to talk to you, but every time I called, your mom would tell me you're not home, including this one time at 10 p.m. on a school night. What would an 11-year-old be out doing at that time? On Friday, Alyssa approached me in the hallway and told me to be at Maddie's house for 2:45. It would just be the 3 of us because Nicole had baseball practice. Apparently, Nicole, you called her the night before to let Alyssa know you couldn't make it. Pretty interesting, since you couldn't even return one of my calls. When I got to Maddie's that afternoon, I was starving, but I knew if I focused hard enough, I would pick up the routine in an hour or so and be out the door by 4 o'clock. Maddie pointed to a rec room and told me to wait in there. She went back upstairs to change her clothes. I sat down in a chair and turned on the TV, flipping to channel 29. The Much Music countdown was on. I decided to watch it. I heard the front door open. I turned my head to see that it was Alyssa. "Hey," she said, and then ran up the stairs. A half hour passed, and I could hear Maddie and Alyssa laughing really loud. The time was now 3:30. The music countdown ended with J-Lo's My Love Don't Cost a Thing at number 1. You both came down to the rec room at 4 o'clock and apologized about being late. It was just that you two were talking and lost track of time. Not only was I really hungry, but kind of mad that I had spent almost 2 hours waiting on 2 people to finish their conversation who clearly didn't like me, and all I got was an insincere sorry. I shrugged it off and decided that it was time for me to go home. The next morning during recess, I asked Nicole if she wanted to play tetherball. She said she wasn't feeling well and was going to lie down in the nurse's office. I offered to walk her there when Maddie and Alyssa showed up. Alyssa crossed her arms and with total attitude said how she was surprised I hadn't figured it out, that Nicole no longer wanted to hang out with me and that I should stop trying so hard and get over it. I felt my vision getting blurry, and before I went on to look even more like a loser by crying in front of these girls and my now ex-best friend, I ran to the girls' bathroom and cried. A couple minutes later, 4th grade teacher Miss Worthington walked in. She asked if I was okay, but I wouldn't answer. She gave me a hand off the ground and took me to her classroom. We probably stared at each other for a solid 5 minutes when I knew that she wouldn't let me go until I spoke. So I told her. I told her everything from the encounter at Maddie's house, the teasing, and the reason why Nicole and I weren't friends anymore. You may be thinking, what a snitch. But the truth is, I wasn't trying to be. I just wanted all this hate towards me to stop. I was tired. Miss Worthington appreciated what I had shared and set up a meeting with my teacher. I hated the fact I had to repeat my story. After hearing it, Mr. Larson couldn't believe it. He thought you girls were smart and well-behaved. I guess he wasn't aware of the term two-faced. Mr. Larson told me that bullying had a zero tolerance level at the school, and he would find a way to set things straight. But first, he had to keep my parents up to date. Well, they weren't too pleased with my secret, but I guess you could say they were happy that I ended up telling someone. My only request for Mr. Larson was to address the situation after the gymnastics presentation. I didn't want a lot of tension in the room. And he agreed. Monday morning was the gymnastics showdown. The only problem was that my group and I had no routine. 2 minutes before we went on, Maddie said that they decided to split the 3-minute time slot, where everyone got to do a 45-second solo. The song they thought would fit was R. Kelly's World's Greatest. I had nothing to say. I just nodded. It was performance time. Maddie was first, followed by Alyssa, and then Nicole. For some reason, it seemed as if there was a routine between the three of you. I saw some high fives and a 10-second mini choreo session on the mats. I was a grand finale. I started with swinging on the ringed bars, then walked on the balance beams, and finished with a somersault. Everything about it was a hot mess. I noticed Mr. Larson scribbling down a few notes. After lunch, Mr. Larson got another substitute teacher to cover the class while we all met up in the counselor's office. I'm pretty sure you all knew the reason. Mr. Larson gave a whole speech on bullying before giving you the consequences. Number 1 was an apology. Number 2, a 7-day in-school suspension. Number 3, you guys would not be attending the class field trip to the amusement park. Was I happy you all had to miss a fun trip? No. Did you deserve not to go? Yes. Was I expecting a more severe punishment? Yes. From that day forward, we never spoke to one another. In fact, there were odd occasions where I would spot you three walking around the school. It wasn't long until it was the end of the school year, and Mr. Larson gave each student a frame he made with a poem by Robert Frost. It was called The Road Not Taken. The last stanza goes something like this. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Those 3 lines is what made me realize that by speaking up about bullying, I went against the crowd, but was able to seek help. For that, Mr. Larson, I thank you for letting my voice be heard and helping me get through one of the most tough times in my life. And that is a wrap. Thanks, superstars, for listening, and tune in for the next episode. Much love from me to you. Mwah. Miss Bollywood, out.